here tonight, and I hope that I can adequately fill her shoes. And John is right. I am not from New York. I'm actually from Denver, Colorado, but I've known Wendy Long for 25 years, and it is very exciting for me to be in New York to help her win the Senate election. And I'll take you back to Wendy and I worked together in the United States Senate for Senator Bill Armstrong back in the 1980s. That's how long I go back with her, back in 1987, 88. And after we got done there, she went on to law school and to distinguish herself as a great constitutional lawyer, and what she did to get the nominations of Chief Justice John Roberts and Justice Alito to the Supreme Court. I went on to, as John mentioned, to run campaigns, but we crossed paths over the years, stayed in touch, and so when I got an email from her back in mid-December, kind of out of the blue, because we frankly had not conversed for probably a couple of years, and from my friend Wendy, and it said, Dick, what do you think about this New York Senate race? And I said, well, frankly, Wendy, I haven't given it a lot of thought, because I was doing some consulting work in Colorado and hadn't joined the campaign for the 2012 election cycle. And I said, what do you think of it? And she said, well, you know, I just think Kirsten Gillibrand is very vulnerable, and that was my perception too. That you know, she had been appointed to the Senate by a controversial governor who had to leave office, and I remember reading about the whole Caroline Kennedy thing, and then I know she won the election to serve out Hillary Clinton's term. But my own perception from afar was, that's right. I mean, she doesn't appear to have really gotten a lock on that seat. And so I actually came to New York in December, and Wendy and I talked a lot about the race, and she said, what I'd really like to do is to find a candidate to support against Kirsten Gillibrand. And at that time, Mark Sanadillo was thinking about running, but she thought they would be better to have she was looking for a strong Republican conservative woman to run for, and actually she had talked to several of her friends in New York who she felt like would be good candidates. And we actually went over and met with my friend Ed Cox, who I'd gotten to know while I was Colorado Republican State Chairman, and met with my friend Ed, who I'd gotten to know on the Republican National Committee, and talked about the race. And then I flew back to my home in Denver, and the holidays came and went, and we kind of continued to talk. And finally she said, you know, I think I'm ready to do this. So we continued to talk, and she had met with Mike Long, the chairman of the Conservative Party, of course, and you know, it's interesting because I will admit I am an avid reader of the New York Times. I've read it for years. It's liberal. It drives me nuts on their editorial page, but I actually love the newspaper. And so through that, I followed New York politics to some extent over the years. And one of the persons that I've always thought it would be fun to meet is Mike Long. And knowing of his leadership of the Conservative Party for so long. And so Wendy met with Mike, and he said, well, why don't you come to our conservative conference in Albany the last week of January? And so I told her, well, I'll go with you. I'd like to see Wendy spoke, and she did such a great job, and people were asking her to run at that event. And then she then engaged in serious conversations with her family. And I got to tell you, as somebody who's run quite a few campaigns, that is really the most important thing. You've got to have your family on board. And so about the middle of February, finally she decided she was ready to do this. It was about that time, you all remember the chaos and the confusion over when the primary was going to be, because the federal courts were involved with the state legislature, and there was all this confusion. And finally, the date of the primary was set for June 26th, which forced the Republican convention to be set on March 16th. So here we are 4 weeks from the convention, and I'm thinking, boy, I've never engaged in a campaign like this before, where you get in the race and 4 weeks later, one of the most crucial steps of the election process is literally 4 weeks from that point. And so we embarked on a crash course of running across New York. This is a very big state, and traveled hundreds of, well, thousands of miles actually in total, going to and meeting with Republican members of the state committee. We're going to vote in Rochester on March 16th. Wendy talked to people across the state, and then, as you know, there were two other gentlemen who got in, very good candidates for the United States Senate as well. Nassau County Controller George Maragos, who's an outstanding man, and also Congressman Bob Turner, who of course was a hero to many Republicans, not only here in New York, but across the country when he won that seat that had been in Democratic hands for 80 years, and I think that's wonderful that he won that. But Wendy has something special. I mean, we've got two very solid Republican opponents. But one of the things I know about her, having worked with her 25 years ago, is the passion she brings to this race for the United States Senate, and the depth of her knowledge, and how articulate she is. But she is tough as nails as well, which is what you have to do to run for public office, especially for a United States Senate seat in New York.